proceeded on recess in July. So we are pleased to be resuming this important work in the interests of people of Trinidad and Tobago. So today we are convening a public hearing pursuant to our inquiry into the efficiency and effectiveness of the Institute of Marine Affairs. And we are pleased to have before us officials of the Ministry of Planning and Development, the Institute of Marine Affairs, and the Environmental Management Authority. I would like members of the present from the Ministry of Planning and Development to please introduce yourselves.
Good morning, everyone. I am Mira Ramisa, the Acting Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Planning and Development. And I have with me here
Carla Sorrell, State Council, Ministry of Planning and Development.
Hi, good morning. David Passad, Environmental Manager in the Ministry of Planning and Development.
Thank you.
Welcome all. Welcome all. Members of the the Institute of Marine Affairs, could you please introduce yourselves?
Chairman, thank you. My name is Hayden Alexander. I am the Chairman of the Board of Governors of the Institute of Marine Affairs.
Yeah, so good morning again. My name is Ricardo Alfred, Deputy Chairman, Institute of Marine Affairs.
Good morning. My name is Rahana Juman, and I'm the Acting Director at the Institute of Marine Affairs.
Good morning. I'm Alicia Carter Fisher, the Chief Information Officer.
Welcome all. And last but not least, the Environmental Management Authority. Could the members there please introduce yourselves?
Good morning, Chairman. My name is Hayden Romano, Managing Director of the Environmental Management Authority.
Morning, Chairman. Steve Lalbihari, Regional Coordinator of the Emergency Response and Investigations Unit of the Environmental Management Authority.
So, I welcome you all here today to this inquiry and into this institute, institute which plays a very important role in our country and also the regional areas also, I understand. The objectives of this inquiry is one, to examine the projects, the programs, the initiatives that the Institute of Marine Affairs has pursued over the past 5 years. Two, to evaluate the impact of the Institute of Marine Affairs on the development and implementation of policies aimed at preserving and developing the marine and coastal ecology of Trinidad and Tobago. And thirdly, to assess the factors which are hindering the successful execution of projects, programs, and initiatives aimed at curtailing the degradation of marine and coastal environment. At this stage, I welcome all, and I would like the members of I'd like the Deputy Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Planning and Development, Ms. Mira Ramisa, to please give us a brief opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee, as well as to the listening and viewing public. The Ministry of Planning and Development thanks you for the invitation to attend this inquiry to discuss the efficiency and effectiveness of the Institute of Marine Affairs. Balancing development with protecting the environment, including the marine environment, is one of the greatest challenges facing the world at this time. At the national policy level, the environment is held as central to a sustainable and prosperous future, which is demonstrated in one of the 5 Vision 2030 development themes, namely, placing the environment at the center of social and economic development. The work of the IMA is crucial to achieving our socio-economic and environmental goals, as it is the only multidisciplinary coastal, marine, and environmental research institution that provides the evidence to guide and support the sustainable management of the coastal and marine areas and resources of Trinidad and Tobago. The Ministry of Planning and Development has an ongoing collaborative and symbiotic relationship with the IMA in the conduct of its work. Relevant divisions and bodies under the remit of the ministry, such as the Town and Country Planning Division, the Environmental Policy Planning Division, the Environmental Management Agency, and the Caribbean Industrial Research Institute work together to provide technical input in areas such as oil spill fingerprinting, certificate of environmental clearances assessment with regard to the marine environment, coastal erosion, and national reporting in relation to the multilateral environment agreements. The ministry also provides administrative support to the IMA in areas such as budget preparation, facilitation of timely release of funds, and the provision of opportunities for the IMA staff to attend international and local training aimed at building staff capacity, as well as establishing networks with other institutions. In closing, I would like to reiterate that the ministry remains committed to working closely with the IMA to achieve its goals and objectives to the ultimate benefit of the nation. We at the ministry, the IMA, and the EMA stand ready to provide further information that would assist the committee in its deliberation on this important matter. We look forward to your further guidance and recommendations that may proceed from this discourse. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ramesser. And now will Mr. Hayden Alexander, the Chairman of the Board of Governors of the Institute of Marine Affairs, give us a brief 2-minute opening statement, please.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee, members of the viewing and listening public. So in addition to what the member of the ministry would have said, I will just give a little background about the Institute of Marine Affairs. So it being a statutory body established by an Act of Parliament, Chapter 3701. It was established following negotiations for an agreement in 1974 between the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the United Nations. Through its executing agency, the UNDP, the IMA has been in operation since 1978, and in 1990, the legislation was amended to emphasize and underscore the institutional regional role and expand its scope to include marine and other related areas of environment. It is one of the oldest multidisciplinary research organizations in the Caribbean community, established to conduct interdisciplinary studies. The functions of the IMA are spelled out in the IMA Act, one of which is to conduct research and development of the marine and related resources of Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean and adjacent regions, as well as another to establish at the IMA an information center for collection and dissemination of information on economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal developments in the marine and coastal zones of the Caribbean and adjacent regions. Our vision statement is to be the center of expertise for marine scientific research in the Caribbean region. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alexander. And I see you have a great responsibility in assisting our country and the region. At this stage, would Mr. Hayden Romano, the Managing Director of the Environmental Management Authority, give a 2-minute opening statement?
Good morning again, Chairman. The goal of Trinidad and Tobago's national environmental policy is to improve and maintain a high level of environmental quality for current and future generations. This must be done whilst ensuring that the health, interests, and development of the people of Trinidad and Tobago are not compromised. The Institute of Marine Affairs, which celebrates 50 years in 2026 of service to the people of Trinidad and Tobago and the region, is a critical entity in the achievement of Trinidad and Tobago's national environmental policy. The EMA, the younger sister of the IMA, as we were established in 1995 and will celebrate 30 years in 2025, have a very close relationship with the Institute of Marine Affairs, as we depend on this multidisciplinary research institute to assist us in many of the activities of the EMA. Chairman, we at the EMA look forward to assisting the JSC in this inquiry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Romano. And I'm certain that the combination and the cooperation between your two entities will definitely continue to be a great service to us. Presently, the world leaders are meeting to discuss the disastrous effects that climate change is having on the global population. You've seen just recently in St. Lucia, and then a broad spectrum all in Pakistan, a third of the country, I think, was covered underwater. So definitely, it's a problem out there. And the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that we are on a highway to climate hell with 1 foot on the accelerator. Now, this is those words, would ring a fear in individuals who are being exposed to floods, to the torrential rains, and the global disasters we are seeing. So we have known that Trinidad is undergoing floods, rains, problems in terms of our environment. And we have already taken the fight to the land, where we are looking at deforestation, looking at the carbon footprint, etc. But I see the IMA now having an important role to take in this fight to the sea. And in fact, they have taken the fight to the sea because they are a part of our army, where their equipment is really the wetlands, which would be our weapons to fight climate change. So the marine environment, I understand, absorbs 35 times the amount of carbon as the tropical rainforest, 35 times as fast as a tropical rainforest. So your marine environment, which is under your purview, it's really, it's something that our country and the world would have, to look at and to explore in our climate protection policies. So the climate protection you have is really beneath the surface, and then sometimes the mangroves all trap in the blue carbon. So we see the seagrass, the mangrove as storing and trapping carbon, and if it is destroyed and if those environments are allowed to be, further destroyed, you find it can release stored carbon. So not only does this environment gets the carbon from the atmosphere, but the stored carbon being released could actually serve as releasing a carbon bomb into our global scenario. So while people describe forests as the lungs of the earth, our wetlands are the kidneys of the earth, which regulate water and filters waste from the landscape. So I am indeed privileged. I'm happy to be chairing this meeting. I'm happy to have your presence here, because I think your mandate in the IMA is certainly very important, not only for the effect of global warming, but the effects of looking at the carcinogens that are in our fish from oil spills, from looking at stimulating the economy. So I thank you for being here. And this discussion, I'm hoping that we can give you any sort of help you need to carry your fight for the populace, for the community, for the country, for the planet further. So we are here to help, and we're here to see what sort of mechanisms you would need to help, what constraints you have. So at this stage, I would like to remind members that if you, during the meeting, that committee members and officials to direct their questions through their chair. And I would like to remind members to kindly activate your microphones on your devices when acknowledged by their chair, and to turn it off when they have concluded their contribution. So at this stage, as I say, I welcome you, and I'd like to find out something that I would like to pose the first question. The IMA was established some years ago And it was, I think, under the UN directives that you are assisted. Do you look at our waters here, or do you go further regionally? And how far within the Caribbean region does your organization do testing and assist the United Nations with their mandate in this situation of looking at marine pollution?
I will direct that question through Dr. Juman, our acting director.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of IMA, our focus is within the EEZ of Trinidad and Tobago. However, we do have a regional mandate. IMA is the Regional Activity Center for the Land-Based Sources of Pollution Protocol under the Cartagena Convention, the secretariat of which is the United Nations Environmental Program, Caribbean Environmental Program based in Jamaica. So in terms of our mandate, we also assist the English-speaking Caribbean to address land-based sources of pollution in those areas. In addition, we also sometimes conduct consultancies in the other islands to advise on their environments as well.
So, elaborate from your response. So the land-based sources of pollution, LBS pollution, you assist other countries with this. In terms of Trinidad, what is the most, the most dangerous source of land-based pollution that would affect the marine environment?
All right, Dr. Juman.
Yeah. So actually, majority of 70% of the pollution that enter our oceans comes from the land. And in Trinidad and Tobago, we have, in terms of sources of pollution, we have pollution that's coming from wastewater, sewage, from agricultural runoff, and from industrial runoff.
So in a sense that the agricultural runoff, I mean, we've been hearing that problem for years, that the pesticides that are being used in the land runs off into the sea and destroys the coral and the life there. Our Joint Select Committee would be holding a further meeting next year with the looking at pesticides and the usage. So in terms of the pesticides entering the sea, and even though our farmers are doing an excellent job in trying to feed the nation, our farmers may actually be contributing to the destroying the marine life via the pesticides that they use. Is it in your mandate to direct the farmers what to do? Do you go through the Ministry of Agriculture? How do you try to convince the pesticide industry or the farmers who are contributing to the degradation of the marine environment? What success have you had so far in trying to curtail this aspect of pollution?
So just in the last couple of years, the IMA undertook a study under the Caribbean Large Marine Ecosystem Project, and it was looking at ecosystem-based approaches to manage pollution that's going into our marine environment, specifically our mangrove forests. So for this study, we looked at the Caroni catchment because we had done previous work in that area, and we had identified in the southern side of the Caroni swamp. And you know, the Caroni swamp is of international importance for Trinidad and Tobago, that the main source of pollution, especially nitrate pollution, fertilizer pollution, was coming from the farmers. So we executed a project where we partnered with a number of agencies, including the Pesticide Board, the Ministry of Agriculture, and so on, and specifically the University of the West Indies, to look at alternative to use of pesticides and chemicals. So a pilot project was actually conducted, and it was headed by the University of the West Indies in terms of alternatives to the chemicals. Unfortunately, things did not go as we would have liked, as smoothly as we would have liked because of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, just in September, we would have had a symposium in Warrenville, where we presented the results of our study to the farmers and to the and to the wider community, including the stakeholders. And of course, we intend to continue working with the University of the West Indies and the farming community to see how we could best, assist them in terms of what they use and how they use what they use.
You see my face, if there is more torrential rains washing down, in further in going out, you find that that more chemicals will be washed into the ocean. Have you done studies comparing through the years if there is a decrease in the pesticides that is coming into the marine environment? And in terms, and have you gotten any sort of feedback from the ministry if the farmers are now adopting better farming practices? So in one way we could judge it by the chemicals. If it's still coming in, still there, or increasing or decreasing, we could know the success of your educational drive and your interaction with the other agencies. So do you have anything to judge that success? Yeah.
No, I don't think we have anything to judge. We did collect data just recently. We collected tilapia from the Caroni Swamp, and we would have tested them for a number of pesticides. We did get recorded breakdown products from things like DDT that has been banned. However, some other chemicals that would have been tested did not exceed what you would call standards, right? But because we don't have enough historical information, I cannot indicate whether we have seen an improvement in terms of how the farmers utilize the chemicals. But we are working with NAMDEFCO and the Ministry of Agriculture in terms of providing alternative, because we do in Trinidad and Tobago deal with a lot of pests. So we need to find alternative to address pests and other problems.
Sure, thank you. And one other thing, when you are getting the consultant, the position where people are actually trying to get you to act as consultants in the region, is it something that you are paid to do to help you with your running of your department?
Yes, it is. So because of we've been receiving reduction in our subventions, we have to generate some revenue. So we do consulting to help us generate revenue to buy equipment and so forth.
Okay, thank you for that. I think member Lakshmi Dayal had some questions she wanted to pose to you. So, member.
Thank you, Chairman. Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for participating today. Before I get into the main questions, I just wanted to piggyback on your question, Chairman, and ask about apart from the land-based pollution, we have a policy on developing, I think it's called the leisure marine sector. And I noticed that a handbook and some work has been done by IMA and EMA together. But I'm just wondering, how has the monitoring been going in terms of pollution being caused as we seek to diversify and to build what we call the yachting industry? What's the impact that you've noticed of us trying to diversify our economy and build that sector, the impact on the marine environment? And how are you all measuring and what steps are you taking to control the impact on the marine environment whilst this industry is being pushed as a possible area for development in the country?
Okay, thank you. So the Institute of Marine Affairs, we do research, we collect data, and then we provide information to the regulatory agencies that would implement. So with regards to pollution is one of the biggest challenges we face. It has been a pervasive problem. And we would have in 2016 prepared our first State of the Marine Environment report where we indicated such. We have a long-term monitoring program where we monitor not only the pollution levels, but we also monitor the ecosystems, the mangroves, the seagrasses, and the coral reef. Well, we would like to do it everywhere. We don't have the resources, so we focus on high impact areas, like for instance, the Gulf of Paria. In addition to that, the IMA has been instrumental in developing we have draft an integrated coastal zone management policy that speaks about all the impacts on the marine and coastal environment and speaks to the uses of the coastal and marine environment. And that policy has been submitted for cabinet approval. But it addresses all the impacts, not only from pollution, but from other activities, both land-based and sea-based, as well as from impacts from climate change, because as indicated, we have to adapt to the impacts of climate change. And most of our population and most of our activities are actually located along our coastal zone.
Okay, so could you be a little more specific with respect to the yachting industry and your studies and your research and all of that? What are your findings specifically with respect to that industry?
Well, we don't monitor just the yachting industry. We monitor the Gulf of Paria, and we monitor the Chaguaramas area where you have the yachting sector. Back in 2000, when the yachting industry first basically exploded, we would have done studies, and there was a concern about pollution. And what was found is also in addition to pollution from the yachting sector, we also had pollution from land-based sources. So it was very hard to just say that it was primarily from the yachting sector. I think the situation still persists where, in addition to pollution that may be coming from the yachting sector, we do still have problems with land-based sources of pollution. So that contributes to the pollution in the Gulf of Paria. With regards to the yachting sector, in doing work with the yachting sector, most of them have holding tanks, right? Because they are required in other countries, it's legislated that you have to have these holding tanks. And the yachters will tell us that they don't release their waste in the area, in the vicinity of the area that they're at. They would normally go a certain distance offshore to release their waste. But as of now, I don't think we have any regulations in place with regards to collection of waste from yachts.
And do you think that it would be necessary or important for us to have legislation to regulate that industry with respect to its impact on coastal marine environments?
Definitely. We need to, especially if we're looking at expanding in our blue economy and expanding in all these sectors, we definitely have need those legislation. I know that we have draft legislation that is prepared by the Maritime Services Division for marine pollution from ships. And that there's a bill, and that bill, I think, addresses a lot of those issues, but that is still at the bill stage.
Thanks very much. Let me ask you a little bit now about your research and public awareness initiatives. You wanted to increase publication in peer-reviewed journals, and you mentioned that at least 10 peer-reviewed publications over the period of time you're trying to get published. How has that been going in terms of getting your research papers published in these peer-reviewed journals? And you could tell us a little bit about the journals and so on that you would be approaching.
So as a scientific organization, our scientific integrity is judged by our publication in international peer-reviewed journals. And we have published in recent time, I think within the last 5 years, we've had more than 10 publications in different journals that range from journals that deal with marine pollution, journals that deal with ecosystem health, and as well as policies, journals that deal with governance and policies. So we've had some success. Over the last couple of years, we've had some delays again because of the COVID pandemic, and also to a lot of the journals that we would have submitted to has been taking a little longer to get back to us in terms of their review and so forth. So even on their side, it takes a little while.
Okay, so if you could sorry, go ahead.
So the thing about the peer-reviewed journals, that is the scientific aspects of it. This is what you would share with your scientific colleagues and so forth to build your profile as a scientific institution. But then we focus as well on turning that scientific information into useful information that the public could digest in terms of our public education and awareness.
Good. So
side of things.
Right. So just for our benefit, if you could produce to the Secretariat copies of the articles that you have been able to publish in the last
Yes.
that 5 years, and you could send us a list as well of the ones that are submitted and you're waiting feedback on.
Sure.
But a
We can-
quick question: have you seen a benefit in terms of being able to publish in these peer-reviewed journals? Have you seen a benefit in terms of your ability to access, let's say, grant funding and so on? Does it impact, and has it made a significant impact with respect to those things, and obtaining funding? As you say, you try to build the credibility and profile of the institute.
Yes, I think we have seen within recent time the benefits of that, and that is through collaboration. We have more agencies, international agencies actually coming to the institute and asking us to collaborate on projects and so forth. And we're doing more collaborative research regionally and internationally. So yes, it has done that in terms of building the profile, and people know that we're here and we're doing work. And now we're having more interest in the institute and being a partner in executing some of these projects.
Which helps you to make some money as well, right?
Well, not so much money. Those projects, I mean, we get funding, but it's for research purposes. It's not like we make money. But like, for instance, right now we're working with United Nations Division on Law of the Sea, doing an ocean governance study for the region. And this is to what's advising in terms of developing our blue economy. So studies like that. We have another project that we're working with the Commonwealth as well as UNEP, United Nations Environmental Program. And again, we're looking at our readiness. They actually develop a tool to look at a sustainable blue economy rapid readiness tool. And we are one of the pilot countries where they're testing this tool to see how ready we are with regards to expanding into our blue economy. So those are just some of the examples. We also been we had a meeting with the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund with regards to developing a mangrove restoration project in the Eastern Caribbean. And that came out of work that we would have done in St. Lucia, assisting them in terms of developing a restoration plan for one of their mangrove forests. So yes, it helps us a lot.
Okay. I have another question. I have a few questions now based on what you said, but stick a pin. When you talk about mangrove restoration, is the institute consulted with respect to developmental approvals granted in Trinidad and Tobago specifically, where there is an impact on the mangroves? A potential impact on mangroves?
Yes, we are. So we are consulted at the beginning of the process in terms of when the developer goes to the EMA to get their certificate of environmental clearance. Sometimes they have to do an impact assessment, environmental impact assessment, and the EMA will produce the terms of reference. Those terms of reference are sent to the IMA for our review. So we ensure that everything is covered and it's quite comprehensive. And then after the EIA is done, right, the EIA is actually sent again to the IMA for review. So we are involved at both sides. We work, as you say, very closely with the EMA. So if there's a problem in any mangrove area, they would normally consult the institute and ask advice on how to treat with it.
Okay. All right. You mentioned before that the peer review journals and the scientific side, you want to translate that into plain English for the population to become aware now, right? So that's my next set of questions. If you can tell us about the projects you're undertaking, let's say within the last 5 years, to try to stimulate public interest and public awareness in terms of coastal environmental issues and mitigating against, the harmful effects of various activities and so on our coastal marine environments. If you could just tell us a little more about that, because I think the scientific side, maybe 5% of the population would understand and appreciate that side of it. But for the average person on the streets, tell us, if you tell somebody on the street about Institute of Marine Affairs, how are you going to explain to them what you do and how are you reaching everyone else who doesn't really understand the scientific aspects?
Okay, member, I would direct that question to our Chief Information Officer, Ms. Carter Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Thank you, Mr. Alexander. The Institute of Marine Affairs produces a number of communication products, an external newsletter that is distributed to a number of our stakeholders, including the school population that's on our list. We have a list of about 122 schools. That external newsletter is issued 3 times a year. Also, our information officers engage our post-primary students in an ocean literacy outreach program that has been going on for the last 10 years or so. It initially started with our students in our fence line communities, particularly Carenage, and beginning in 2018, we would have expanded to schools in the Degumartin area, schools in Chaguanas, and expanded as well to schools in Sangre Grande. Each year yes.
So,
Each
Tobago,
year we attempt.
have you done?
Tobago, we do a symposia, community symposia. So I'm giving you the products that are basically every year that cost us little money. But since 2019, with the support of the Republic Bank Limited, we started doing radio broadcasts. So in 2019, we had a pilot project where we would have produced 15 radio broadcasts called Beyond the Blue. The broadcasts are aired during prime time, about around 7:20 or so on I-95.5 and on Radio Tambourine, and from 2019 to 2021 also on Radio Sangeet. And so we started that pilot project. We received a lot of feedback where persons were interested. So we continued the broadcast in 2020. In 2020, our theme basically revolved around the UN International Decade of Ocean Science, and we would have produced 40 or so programs. In 2019, I should also say, the Institute hosted a marine science exhibition for the schools of Trinidad and Tobago. It was both a in-person exhibit held at NALIS. Also, students were able to, those who could not physically attend, were able to join online. It was the first immersive experience where we used models, 3D modeling, we would have used virtual reality, and so on to engage our students using their full 5 senses. We would have reached more than 300 students in 2019, and persons could have also joined online to hear IMA researchers delivered lectures on various topics. So that would have taken place between June 4th to 6th in 2019. In 2020, we could not continue because of COVID-19, but we would have pivoted and developed our virtual distinguished lecture, which was geared towards civil society, academia, and the business community. In 2020 as well, we would have produced 40 broadcasts, educating our publics on various topics within ocean conservation and so on. And then in 2021, we continued with our literacy program, producing 25 programs, continued with our distinguished lecture. And in 2022, this year, we are producing programs for the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture. This year, we are engaging our students with competitions for which they can win prizes. And the competitions are virtual in terms of word search and so on. So the students are supposed to look at the broadcast, the audio broadcast and the visual broadcast that we produce. We would have also provided teachers with content that they can use to develop, to develop their own teaching of the students, and students can win a prize. And it runs from August this year, the middle of August to the end of December.
Okay. All right. So I have 3 questions and I'll just go all 3, and I don't want to take up all the time. So you can just answer them briefly. One would be, do you intend to resume that immersive experience you spoke about for schools now that we have lifted some of the COVID restrictions? Is it something you'll continue? Two, I haven't heard much about social media. Do you all have an idea? I mean, really and truly right now, I can't tell you how many people I know listen to radio programs, especially talk programs, but I know a lot of people on TikTok and whatever they call the other things, the younger generation, particularly Instagram and stuff like that. So social media, have you all given consideration to that in order to reach that target market? And three, most importantly, what methods or mechanisms are you using to measure the success of your outreach to the public, and what have been your findings? If so, are you measuring it, and what have you found in terms of the responsiveness of the public to your efforts to create more awareness about the issues that you deal with?
Well, social media, we do have an active social media platform. We use Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. We, of course, have our website. All our content from our radio broadcast is placed on our social media platforms, and our students are encouraged to interface with our social media platforms. So yes, it's quite active. We also use SoundCloud for our audio files. And we have seen, we have hired a digital content specialist in May, and we have seen since her arrival, greater engagement in terms of, more persons following our platforms, upwards of, thousands more following our platforms since she has arrived. So I would invite you, member, to go to our website, www.ima.gov.tt. You would see that it's up to date with all our latest products, and also our Facebook page, up to date with all our latest products, all our latest initiatives. So yes, social media is very much a part of what we do. With regard to the immersive experience in terms of our exhibition that we would have done in 2019, we would certainly like to go back to that in years to come. In 2019, it was a bit of a pilot, and we would have reached out to 16 corporations and sponsors who joined with us to make that marine exhibition and science possible for our students. And we would, in going forward in the future, we would again be looking for corporate partners to assist us in developing and putting out there for our public a marine science exhibition for our students and for members of the public. And your third question, member, if you would remind me.
How are you? What mechanism?
In terms of measurement, well, we in the IMA had, as part of our strategic plan, the development for 2019, I think it was a national brand awareness survey. Unfortunately, because of funding, we've had to shelve that survey, which would have given us the baseline that we were looking for to figure out, how well we were known amongst the national community and amongst our stakeholders in the Caribbean, and in terms of our reputation, if we were meeting the expectation of our stakeholders. At present, we are basically using anecdotal data. So anecdotal data in terms of persons calling the IMA saying, yes, we have heard your radio broadcast, various companies asking us to share our broadcast with them so that they can use it as part of their internal activities or part of their intranet or podcast internally. And also because of the distinguished lecture and some of the initiatives that we have had, it has placed a spotlight on us with regards to the blue economy. And the UN has approached the IMA through our focal point, which is the Ministry of Planning and Development, to engage us with respect to building capacity in Trinidad and Tobago for a blue economy, well, really the expansion and deepening of a blue economy in Trinidad and Tobago.
All right, I'll give way. We'll come back to budget after, so sure. I'll give it.
Okay, thank you for those that question, member, those questions, and thank you for the response. But, you know, I must say I'm pleased to see the educational trust you have in the schools, sensitizing young students about the importance of the marine environment, and also your educational trust and your outreach to the farmers. So I think you're hitting it all how you're going in the radio, the older media, you're going to social media. So you're doing an excellent job. I must say, I was even, I saw one of your initiatives where you actually looked at one of our predators, the lionfish, and you at least put it in such a way that people could go and hunt the lionfish, and also even have it available now for people to eat in certain restaurants. Could you tell us the dangers of the lionfish? And I think that initiative you have of people, of certain restaurants offering lionfish, I think it's an excellent initiative also, how to get rid of this dangerous species. What is the danger with this lionfish?
Dr. Juma?
Okay, so the lionfish was an aquarium species that I don't know if it was accidentally released in North America, and we actually were tracking it coming all the way down, and it was first recorded here in Trinidad and in Tobago actually in 2012. However, we were already putting things in place because we knew what it was doing in the other parts of the region with regards to the fisheries and the coral reef. So we had set up an ad hoc committee and started doing work on the lionfish in terms of preparing for its arrival. We would have received funding to do a public education and outreach program back in 2013, 2014. And we would have done a lot of that with the fisher folks in terms of how to treat with the lionfish. Because, you know, it has venomous spine, so you have to, even if you're encouraging people to eat the lionfish, you have to show them how to clean the lionfish so they don't get stuck with the spine. And if they do get stuck with the spine, what to do. So we did an extensive public education and awareness program with regards to the lionfish, and we held and this was done with stakeholders, fishermen, as well as with the schools. And we also had a series of derbies, competitions for folks catching the lionfish. And what we did there, initially, folks, especially in Tobago, were very, very, you know, they didn't want to eat it because it was new. It's an invasive species. It does not belong here. It's from the Indo-Pacific. And because it does not belong here, it does not have any natural predators. So nothing feeds on it. And what it does is it's a fish that multiplies quite quickly, as well as very gluttonous. It eats just about everything. So yes, it has a negative impact on our fisheries, on our coral reefs, because they're mainly found associated with our coral reef. So we've had the culling exercise, and we've actually had active culling where we provided divers and fishermen with pole spears and so forth to remove the lionfish. We had the derby, we had the competition, and then we had the, when they catch the lionfish, we had different folks come and prepare the lionfish in different ways to get them to eat it. We partnered with the Hotel Association, as well as with the, what used to be the hospitality school. And we had tasting events, you know, where a chef would have prepared it 10 or 20 different ways, basically to get the restaurants and so forth to serve it, because we're promoting eat it to beat it. If we eat it, we control it. And that's what we have been doing. And we're now engaged in another project where we're looking at the lionfish in the fish pot fisheries. Fishermen are now finding the lionfish in deeper waters. They're catching it in their fish pot. And we're now about to start a project to work with them to develop specific fish pots to catch the lionfish, again, with the intention of creating a product that can be sold on the market and can generate revenue. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Mr. Juba. Yeah. Yes, could you, two things I want to say. I thank you for your proactive measures where you saw this problem abroad and you realized it would come here and you took that activity. I want to ask a question though. You remember there's the stony coral tissue loss disease, the SCTLD. And at one stage I read that in Puerto Rico, the governor actually had to declare a state of ecological emergency, where he said that this white plague has ravaged coral reefs, and we have to put this situation in context of natural disasters. So he was trying to say that this is something, is such an important aspect to deal with. And more $1 million was allocated to help with reef harvesting, restoration, and even applying antibiotic amoxil, which I knew were for humans, to the weed. So therefore, this was first discovered near Miami, I think in 2014, and spread to Belize, Mexico, Jamaica, St. Martin, St. Lucia. Are you seeing this in our waters, especially Tobago, where I'm worried about with our coral reefs? And if so, what sort of measures have you put in place to mitigate against this?
So we have not, as of now, confirmed stony coral tissue loss disease in Tobago. We have been monitoring our coral reef. More recently, we've been doing a lot of work towards looking at coral spawning, towards rehabilitating degraded reefs. We have not documented it. However, we have put out public education and awareness information, and we've been working with the divers and the fishers and so forth to report to us in the event they see this disease. What we know for a fact from our research is that after we have a coral bleaching event, we usually have after an event, we have more coral disease on our reefs. Right now, we are actually looking at a bleaching event that's taking place. We've had some record of coral bleaching that we're checking on and monitoring to see how, because when there's elevated sea surface temperature for a period of time, the reef can either regenerate or rehabilitate, or then you could also lead to, coral diseases coming in, partial mortality or even total mortality. So that's the kind of thing we're looking at. But as of now, we have not documented or we have not confirmed that particular disease on our reefs in Tobago. But we are aware and we have put out the information, and I've been asking folks to, if they see what looks like it, to report it to us.
Thank you. And as we're talking about Tobago, our member, Senator Hilsa from Tobago, is anxiously awaiting to give an input and to inquire about some affairs in Tobago. So, Senator Hilsa, it's your forum.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to all the officials for coming out this morning. I have a couple questions, but a spin-off question from what the Chairman would have touched on was the concerning the lionfish. With all of your initiatives so far and your intervention so far, have we been able to do another census or another count where the lionfish population is at in Tobago and how dangerous it is to the marine life?
Yes, we have been doing periodic reef fish surveys. The last one was done pre-COVID. So yes, we are looking at the lionfish and where the populations are concentrated. And we have encouraged folks to cull the lionfish, but mainly in the shallower areas, the spearfishers and the scuba divers. But in the deeper waters, that's where we're focusing now. And therefore, that's where we have the lionfish fish pot to capture the lionfish in the fish pot, because that's not where people would normally go and spearfish or remove lionfish. So we have with that, looking at that, as I said, we are about to start another project, the lionfish fish pot fisheries, and in that project as well, we were going to be doing surveys, looking at as well the summer content as well as the lionfish to identify what it is they're feeding on and that sort of stuff in more detail to help us manage our fisheries. One of the things I forgot to mention before is one of the things we also prepared was an app, a lionfish CATT app. Basically, it was done under the Lionfish Project where people can use the app. It's freely available and report where they document where they're seeing lionfish. So we have a better idea of where they are, how much, and that sort of stuff. So we have encouraged that. And we also, the app is developing a way too that they can also report any sort of environmental incidents. So whether it's an oil spill, a fish kill, mammal stranding, anything of that nature, they can utilize the app to report. But we have to remember, we launched the app in 2020, and then we went into COVID. And during that time, for the last couple of years, the amount of folks that were out on the reefs and so on had, you weren't doing that sort of activities. Right. We're now getting back on track, and we're now working more to promote the app and work closer with the stakeholders to help us mitigate some of these problems.
Okay, no problem. From your submissions, a couple of things I wanted to touch on. Your Tobago projects initiatives, the Heritage Park. Where exactly is the Heritage Park located?
Is the Pigeon Point, the whole thing is the, yeah, Pigeon,
Oh, the Pigeon Point Heritage Park.
Heritage Park, yeah. So,
oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. And you've had funding already. How much funding has been dispersed thus far with regards to the Heritage
field
Park?
station.
Yes.
I know this year we would have gotten funding with regards to, we would have gotten 2 million allocated. And previously, I think we had 1 million or so allocated for the construction of the Tobago field station. We would have gotten the lease from the THA for lands within the Tobago, the Pigeon Point Heritage Park, the land management agency.
Land management agency, right? So your focus in the park would be the Bucca Reef and the all surrounding the lagoon and all of that.
Well, the field station is for the whole of Tobago. It's located within the Heritage Park because it's an ideal location for us to do some experimental work. As it is right now, you know, we can't do in situ work. We have to bring things across to Trinidad for analysis and so on. We want to be able to do more work in Tobago, especially when we move into things like coral restoration and so on. We would like to set up our nurseries and so forth in Tobago. So that's the purpose of the lab, but it's not just for the Bucca Reef area, it's for the whole of Tobago.
All right. So you've been receiving funding, direct funding, or just the land allocation from the THA?
We got the land lease from the THA, and the money so far that has come from the project has been through the public sector investment program. That's where the funding is coming from.
Actually, could you, no, one minute, could you tell us how much money you got so far from released, that was released? Yeah.
I don't have the exact figure.
You could provide it in writing to the committee.
Sure, we could provide that in writing, the amount that we have spent so far and how much has been allocated, but we could provide that in writing.
Yeah, how much has been released? Thank you. Good, thank you.
Okay. So how do we intend to fund the project going forward? Have you had direct contact with the THA as regards to funding going forward because after you set up the field station in Tobago, you require funding to manage and to do your research. How do you propose to get the funding to do your work in Tobago?
So right now we receive a subvention from government to do our monitoring in Tobago and our research. In terms of the future, we're looking at grant funding. So like right now, we do have a project currently in Tobago called Marine Resilience Initiative, and that is funded by BPTT to look at a feasibility study for rehabilitation of seagrasses and coral reefs. So a combination of government funding as well as grant funding from other agencies, private sector and UN agencies as well. We look at the possibility of getting funds through the UN agencies. With regards to the Tobago House of Assembly, we have a memorandum of understanding with the Tobago House of Assembly. And we engage with the Tobago House of Assembly in everything that we do. They're an active partner. They're engaged in we always consult with them in all the projects that we do.
Further member, under the IMA Act, we have to have a member of the board appointed to represent the Tobago House of Assembly. So there's a member now on the Board of Governors that represents the Tobago House of Assembly as well. So the interests of the Tobago House of Assembly are always served through the Board of Governors, through the Institute of Marine Affairs.
Who's the member, if you mind me asking?
Who is the current member?
The current member, yes.
Oh, the name of the person?
Yeah.
Oh, his name, Governor Dave Elliott. He's the current member. I'm representing the THA, on the board.
Well, no, Mr. Elliott and his exploits in the lionfish business as well. So he's been doing a lot of work here.
Okay.
I'm glad that you mentioned the Marine Resilience Initiative. How has that project been going? What are your successes so far with regards to that?
So it's a feasibility study where we're looking at areas that would be feasible for seagrass restoration and coral reef restoration. So we'll be collecting some of the ecological, physical data. We have done some pilots in terms of seagrass restoration using a couple different methodologies, and we're now trying to determine whether the methodology is actually working. I was actually in Tobago yesterday, actually looking at some of the seagrass work in the Kilgwin areas, one of the areas we're looking at, and we realized that one of the methods that we're using may not be appropriate because the conditions there are very, very turbulent. Yes. With regards to the coral reef now, we're looking at in terms of using this, looking at coral spawning. So for the first time ever, we have been able to document coral species spawning in Tobago with the intent of looking at the spawns and how we could capture them to do more restoration work, rather than doing it asexual, doing sort of sexual reproduction. And, you know, gamete, the eggs, having the embryo, growing that in-house, and then after taking it out on the reef. So we're looking at that the feasibility. Okay.
But what I remember seeing when you started the feasibility study, the initial attaching of the seagrass to I think was wire that you were using to secure it into right, BRC, correct. But how does that, I heard the Chief Secretary announce that there is going to be a 5-star 1,000-room hotel in the Kilgwin area. I don't know, between the IMA and the EMA, how do you foresee a project of that magnitude affecting that area in terms of, because I understand it's the second largest wetlands in Tobago.
I would speak on with regards to the wetland part, and then I would defer the question to the EMA. So with regards, Kilgwin is the second largest mangrove forest in Tobago, as well as one of the systems where you have coral reef, seagrass beds, and mangrove forests in close proximity, right? It's an important ecosystem with regards to where it's located and the function that it serves in terms of coastal protection, as well as acting as a windbreak and so forth. The IMA, in conjunction with the THA, has actually submitted a proposal to do some restoration work there to enhance the ecosystem for that reason. So I could speak on that aspect of it, and I'll hand over now to Mr. Romano with regards to the hotel.
One question though, are you uncomfortable with a hotel being built to such close proximity to an area you have been trying to revitalize and to restore?
Mr. Chairman, with regard to that question, the Institute does not express any personal view in terms of any development, right? We, if as consulted by the designated agency, which is the Environmental Management Authority, we will give our advice in terms of that, right? But the Institute expresses no personal view and have no view in terms of any development in any part of Trinidad and Tobago, right? So in terms of that's what I would say. So, but otherwise, I would defer the question to the Environmental Management Authority.
Mr. Romano, I would like to direct that question to you also, because remember, if I'm seeing the good work, the hard work being done by the IMA, and I see their hesitancy in trying to put a position forward. They may give you that in your report assessment for the impact assessment of the area. So in terms of we understand the importance of the preserving our marine environment, the mangrove, the seagrass, which we're trying to at least replant and to help the planet basically. So give us an idea of the impact it may have on the same question I posed, Mr. Romano, if you mind attempted it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, for the opportunity. Chairman, I think that question really highlights the importance of agencies like the Institute of Marine Affairs, because the EMA will be very much dependent on the IMA if and when we get an application for a certificate of environmental clearance for a hotel in Kilwin. To date, we have no application for any hotel in the Kilwin area. So therefore, I mean, making a comment on whether or not a hotel should be built in Kilwin, I mean, we just don't have the information to give you an answer at this point in time, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I thank you for your response, and at least I'm hoping that when you get that request, at least all things considered, we would make the adequate and correct assessment for the benefit of persons.
And Chairman, we assure you, our process is such that all will be involved when we get an application for any development that is going to be significant anywhere in Trinidad and Tobago.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just piggyback on Mr. Morano's response.
Sure.
I want to highlight two specific projects that came to the fore recently in Tobago, and I don't know if the EMA can comment or if they respond on that. One was the stage in the sea that was built for Carnival, or not in the sea, but on the sea, on the shoreline. And the other one is a road construction that is carried to pass through the mangrove in Pigeon Point from the Bonaccord development area into Pigeon Point through the mangrove. So I don't know if the EMA is able to say whether or not they would have received application for the CEC and so on.
So, Chairman, through you, member, we did meet with the Tobago House of Assembly, and I think the meeting was on the 21st of October. And we are awaiting, the THE has promised us some information on both projects, on all their infrastructure projects. We are still awaiting the information, and that information will include the construction that took place in the sea, in the Scarborough area, adjacent to the Scarborough port, and will also include any road development that would require a certificate of environmental clearance. This we are doing as part of our investigations in terms of these two developments, and we're really hoping that we will get the information from the EMA, from the THA in the very near future, so we could continue and close our investigations on those issues. So I mean, we will be premature to actually make any statement whilst we are awaiting the information from the THA.
So Mr. Chairman, I just have a couple of things so that I could, and then I'll be done. In regards to the one that is already completed, to the stage on the shoreline, how does the EMA treat with that? That's an already completed project.
Well,
if your investigations find that there was a breach, how do you treat that?
So member, I mean, you have made the assumption that the project is already completed. We can't make that assumption until the THA advises us that the project is completed. They have, as far as we know, stopped all works in the area, and we are awaiting a response from them in terms of what took place, and that will determine how the EMA proceeds.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I hear the EMA's response, and as I'm aware, this stage. So as far as I could see, the stage has.
Senator, we're losing you a bit. Chair, while Senator Hislop refreshes, could I ask a quick question just to piggyback?
Sure, member. Go ahead, proceed.
Just for the benefit of the public, I think it would be worthwhile to explain when does a project require a certificate of environmental clearance? Because it is clear that the EMA, the requirement for the CEC is what triggers the EMA consulting with the IMA. So I want the public to understand when does a project require a certificate of environmental clearance? So very briefly, I know the legal side of it, but I just wonder if you could break it down for the benefit of the public. When would a CEC be required? For example, with the projects identified by member Hislop, what would have triggered the need for a CEC and in future projects as well?
Thank you very much for that question, Senator. So the CEC rules, the Certificate of Environmental Clearance rules, identifies 41 designated activities. And these activities varied from agriculture activities such as poultry farms to major developments such as hotels over 30 rooms, to developments such as reclamation, as is the case in the Scarborough case, to developments such as roads once they are over 1 kilometer or 1,000 meters, and clearing and other developments. The challenge for the EMA, Senator, Chairman, is we can only make a determination based on the scope of your activity. You need to advise us through the application process what you will be doing for the EMA to determine whether or not you require a CEC. If you proceed with works which will be in contravention of the EM Act, the EMA will investigate and we will take action. But we need to consult with the developer to make sure we have all the information before we take action.
Right. Okay. So, and this could be provided in writing later on. Could you tell us, for example, well, one, do you think the CEC rules need to be revised to include more active areas of activity, which you could answer now or in writing? That's your choice. But secondly, can you tell us in the last 5 years, how many cases the EMA has been able to detect where there have been breaches either of persons going outside the scope of their CEC or not complying with terms stated on this? Because I know sometimes the CEC is issued with certain terms and conditions that they have to comply with. How many cases have you all detected and what action has been taken in those cases in the last 5 years? If you could give us that in writing, that'd be us.
Well, I mean, some of it I'll have to give you in writing, especially in terms of how many breaches we have had, what action we've taken in the last 5 years. That one I will surely give you in writing. I mean, we'll provide for you in writing. With respect to the amendment to the CEC rules, and this is a discussion that is ongoing at the EMA. Some of us feel the thresholds for some of the activities are actually too low. There are a number of agencies that's supposed to be treated with environmental issues. Not the EMA treated with every little issue that takes place in this country. EMA was established, initially as something new. And therefore, in terms of the 41 activities, designated activities, I think we tried to put everything inside there. My feeling, and this is Hayden Romano feeling, not the whole EMA feeling, is that some of the thresholds are too low. Other agencies, and I don't want to name any agencies, should be treated with those activities, including, let's name some, the municipal and the regional corporations. They should be treated with some of these things. The Town and Country Planning Division, the Commission of State Lands, all these agencies, you know, do have responsibilities to the environment. And therefore, the EMA really should be concerned with the bigger activities. But as I said, that is a conversation, an active conversation that is taking place in the EMA. And I think, I mean, we would want to come to Parliament, not only with an amendment to the rules, but also an amendment to the EM Act, which of course needs the whole Parliament, the support of the whole Parliament, because the EM Act is majority legislation.
If I could just summarize what you just said, you basically believe that some of the responsibilities, for example, you mentioned roads over a kilometer, that's not much, right? Yeah. But you think that there's some of the responsibilities with respect to CECs that could be divested from the EMA to regional corporations and so on, because they may be better placed to make those decisions. But I think that raises a whole other one as about the resources, because the resources you have and the powers you have under your legislation, they don't necessarily have. So I think that that's an interesting perspective, but it's something that's, again, in context, we don't know if it's possible. I'm surprised about the 1 kilometer. I did not know that. I think that is quite a lowish threshold that maybe burdensome on both the applicants as well as the EMA. But do you think, though, that other agencies have the technical capacity to make decisions with respect to some of these CECs?
Well, Senator, I mean, if agencies, because we depend a lot on agencies there. I mean, the EMA does not have all the resources we require. We depend on the IMA in terms of coastal and marine issues. We depend on town and country planning with respect to planning issues. We depend on Ministry of Agriculture, especially the Forestry Department, with respect to forestry issues and wildlife issues. And therefore, yes, I mean, all of us are starved for resources because we are in a resource constrained time. But I think for us to get sustainable development, we need to have the resources and we need to find the resources. This is critical for our human health and for the environment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I hear you saying that there may be a need to revisit the legislation. And I quite understand that is something that, you know, you may have to put forward your views and what you want change, and this will come forth. But I want to ask, if you have given an approval to say like a hotel to be built on the shoreline, and after a while you realize that some things that the seagrass is dying, there's an indication that stress is occurring, indicator stress. Do you have the ability or the power to go back now to see if a correct decision was made? Or if not you, who will actually go back and look at the environmental? Because yes, we may give a pass to an individual to put up a hotel. We may think it may not damage the environment, but then does the IMA go in after to say if there's an assessment? And if that is so, who will have the authority to say, listen, make some sort of amends because it's causing this damage to our seagrass environment? Who will have that authority? Is there something in place to check what was done would have been, you know, all well and good and continuing to the benefit of the environment?
Well, with respect to most of our projects, especially large projects, one of the conditions in the CEC would be continuous monitoring. And the continuous monitoring will give us information on how is the environment performing based on the new development in the environment. Because remember, all our conditions are supposed to mitigate against negative environmental impact. if, and again, you know, the importance of the IMA is doing monitoring, and I don't know if sometimes it's monthly, sometimes it's quarterly, with respect to the marine environment. I mean, beach profiles that they're doing in Trinidad and Tobago that's telling us what is the impact in terms of erosion. They're doing water quality analysis. If they see upset conditions, they will also be able to tell us what is happening. And therefore, we collectively will have to take action in conjunction, of course, with the property owner or the developer. And the expectation is that the developer will understand that there is an upset condition and that he needs to take action.
So then, sir, I want to make clear. So you do have the authority to see if there's any degradation in the environment and take some sort of action, or do you have to relay that information to a certain ministry, or do you have the initiative? Do you actually do it as a proactive approach that you know?
So we do have a permit monitoring and compliance department, and they are the one tasked with the responsibility of seeing whether or not the developers are meeting the conditions of the CEC. So there is active monitoring taking place.
Thank you. I take comfort to hear that. So I think Member Hillsap would made, I don't know if you would need to come in because we lost you before, but before you come in, sir, I would like to read a question on behalf of Member Ayana Webster Roy, who is on another committee presently, but she, on her behalf, she wants to raise this question. And I read it. Tobago's Northeast region is now the largest UNESCO man and biosphere site in the English-speaking Caribbean. Is the IMA currently leveraging this to facilitate research and conservation efforts in Northeast Tobago? If yes, what are some of the current project's activities? Can the IMA share preliminary findings, outcomes, and how is the IMA engaging the residents to facilitate buy-in?
Okay, thanks for that question. And Dr. Juman, if you can address that question first.
IMA has been at Northeast Tobago has been designated managed the biosphere reserve under UNESCO. We're currently undertaking a feasibility study for coral reef and seagrass restoration in the whole of Tobago and focusing in Northeast Tobago. So yes, we're doing that, looking at the feasibility, and we are engaging with the NGOs in the area to facilitate, to train them and so forth, and the fisher folks and divers. They participate in our activity. So for instance, we've been doing some work where we've been documenting coral spawning, what species of corals are spawning and so forth. And we do that in partnership with folks. We've been having meetings, stakeholder meetings, but also 2 training sessions to educational outreach and so on with the community. So yes, we have been doing that. IMA has under previous improving forest and protected areas management project that was executed through the Ministry of Planning. There's also a management plan for the coastal areas, the coral reefs and so forth in Northeast Tobago. IMA has assisted in terms of developing a monitoring plan for that area, and we continually monitor the coral reefs and the mainly the coral reefs there. And with regards to the new project as well, we'll be looking at the fish community, especially the lionfish community, and working with the fisher folks to address the lionfish that is impacting the reef. And a lot of the areas that we've gotten reports of lionfish is actually in the northeast part of Tobago, where you have deeper coral reef areas. So yes.
Thank you, Mr. Hillsap. Would you want to continue?
Thank you, Chairman. I really wanted to raise that question on behalf of Member Roy, but that's fine. couple of things I wanted to touch on, and then that's it for me. In terms of, we've had the significant flooding throughout primarily Trinidad, but Tobago as well. How does it really affect our coast in terms of fisheries and even the seagrass and so on? How does that significant runoff, that significant silt runoff, how has it been affecting our coast?
It has and continues to affect our coastline. For instance, a lot of our seagrass beds in Trinidad has been decimated. The largest seagrass beds we have now remaining is actually in Tobago, in the Bucca Reef Management Marine Park. That's where the significant amount of seagrasses are. In 2015, we documented the seagrass loss in Kilgwin Bay, and that basically happened around the same time we had a lot of sargassum coming in and submerging the seagrasses. So that's another issue. But with land-based sources of runoff, you're going to have a lot of nutrient-laden, sediment-laden water running into your near shore, and that, of course, with the decreased visibility and have an impact on the plants that live underneath that needs the sunlight to photosynthesize, as well as the salinity. The salinity is also impactful because coral reefs and seagrasses exist within a limited salinity range. And when you have the water being too fresh, that as well has a negative impact on the ecosystems.
Thank you for that answer. And you mentioned the sargassum. Could we eat it? I mean, you're eating the lionfish. Is there any use that you could put to this, either as a medicinal use or actually getting a mineral content from it, using it? Have you explored that?
So there's been a lot with regards to exploring what the sargassum can be used for. Initially, folks were using it as fertilizers for plants and so on, but recent studies have indicated that they have a high content of arsenic and other heavy metals, so we have to be careful. However, there's been work carried on here at the University of the West Indies, where they've developed, I think, a bioplastic out of sargassum, and also UE has developed a biostimulant by isolating compounds out of the sargassum. So there's still a lot of R&D going on, very new R&D, but it is being done with regards to how we can utilize the sargassum. And it's being done here in Trinidad as well and regionally.
Okay, thank you for that. And one other question. You mentioned that you're replanting the seagrass in Tobago, right? And I got some figures where they said 30% of all the seagrass destroyed since the 20th century. And every half hour, the size of a football patch is lost, as globally. If those figures are real, it's frightening. But have you done any sort of replanting in Trinidad since we have been undergoing this heavy flooding that is occurring?
Before you can actually undertake and have a successful restoration program, you have to remove the stressors. So you can't just go and plant and you're still having the floods, you're still having the sediments. We have to address land-based sources of pollution. It has to be an integrated approach where we try to mitigate the impacts, remove some of those impacts, so we have a better chance of success. So in our approach now, through the Marin project, we are looking at the feasibility of doing these projects. But then again, it requires a holistic approach. So we are working with communities, working with state agencies to help us address the problems in the first place. So problems like land-based sources of pollution is major. It has been detrimental to seagrass ecosystems here in Trinidad and Tobago, and we therefore need to address that moving forward if we're going to have successful restoration.
Okay, so and in terms of replanting the mangrove, any areas designated that you may decide that it's a good idea to try to restore this?
So another thing too, so I mean, planting mangrove has become quite popular worldwide, but actually going out there and just planting the mangrove but not understanding why the mangroves died in the first place have shown where the replanting has actually not been successful. Our approach is to look at why the mangroves have died in the first place. A lot of it is hydrological alteration, right? The amount of seawater coming in, the amount of fresh water going out, the flushing and so forth, and dealing with the core cause of the die-off. And therefore, and once we deal with those core causes, then we can have the restoration. So we talk about mangrove rehabilitation by addressing the physical characteristic of the sites, and then we can do the replanting to speed up the restoration. But generally, we have actually done a project in Point Lisas where we actually looked at what would have been inhibited natural mangrove recolonization. We then fixed the environment. We had to remove some overburden in an area where a pipeline was buried. And then once we did that, and there the tidal hydrology was restored, you had natural colonization taking place. So, you would have natural colonization once you restore the natural environment, but you can, if you want to speed up the process a little bit, you can do some replanting. So that's the approach we have been taking.
Is the bird sanctuary under stress, environmental stress?
Well, the Carney Swamp, as you know, drains the largest catchment river basin in Trinidad and Tobago. The Carney River itself, receives water from Valencia all the way down to Sawa. So there's a lot of land-based sources of pollution. However, for now, the Carney River itself does not connect to most of the Carney Swamp. Over the years, we have dredged the river and we have raised the embankment. So the water basically runs straight out into the Gulf of Paria. The tide, right? But it doesn't flush the swamp on a regular basis because it runs straight out. On the southern side, though, we have land-based sources of pollution coming into the Carney Swamp. We have high levels of pollution. We've actually done research where we've identified the source of the nitrogen pollution. And we've also, from our research, learned that the mangrove itself helped in terms of reducing some of that pollutant before it goes out into the Gulf of Paria. But yes, we do have problems with pollution and other impacts on the Carney Swamp.
You mentioned the pipeline, that's an oil pipeline you were referring to?
No, it was an affluent pipeline that passed through.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And okay, so coming in terms of pipelines, and remember there were oil leaks again that and oil spills that especially the Gulf of Paria, where it was reported that there were certain oil this person used despite established guidelines, sometimes near the shoreline. And the Friends and Fishermen of the Sea got a freedom of information to reveal 490 reported oil spills since the beginning of 2018, and with the lack of prosecutions from authorities. So it seems that what I'd like to get from you, the oil spills definitely will cause harm to the environment. And in terms, a UT study was done in 2019 by Balgobin and Ramup Singh and found high levels of PAH, which is found in crude oil and vehicular emissions. And they found those in fish from the Gulf of Paria. Do you have any studies about the level of the carcinogens in the fish that could be harmful? I mean, in Trinidad and Tobago, for the population, which is the best area to catch fish, to eat fish, to consume fish? Is it from the North Coast? Give us an idea if any further studies were done about the carcinogenic components that is found in the fish and the detrimental effect that it may have on our population.
So with regards to the, we measured, I know in the past we have measured polyaromatic hydrocarbon or PHs that are supposed to be carcinogenic, and we have measured it in oysters and in fish. We have not continued, not in recent time, monitoring those, But that information has been provided. There was an ecological risk assessment for the Gulf of Paria that was done by the Environmental Management Authority. And a lot of that information would have been included in that ecological risk assessment. And they were looking at the oil and gas sector in particular. And IMA would have contributed to that.
Well, you see, while the individuals go for the oyster to boost their zinc and their virility, they may be getting the zinc as well as carcinogenic chemicals in it. And this is something I think the population may have to be warned about, seeing that we are having increase in cancers. Yeah. EMA, could you give us any clarification on any further studies or that was done or in terms of the fish that is available, not just for the carcinogenic, but also for any sort of heavy metal?
Chairman, so in between 2018 and 2020, we did a baseline ecological risk assessment for the Gulf of Paria. And yes, there are threats, but we did not, in that study, or in a study that we did in 2016, where we took fish samples and we tested the fish samples, we did not find the levels of concern to human health. We are clear that this work needs to continue. Of course, the challenge always is the resources to do this work, and especially with respect to testing of fish, we had to send the samples to the US for testing. So yes, I mean, because of increased pollution, both from land-based sources, from the oil industry, we need to be tested. We feel more frequently.
Yeah, so definitely sending these samples for testing. I recall the IMA had stated in your report that the carbon analyzer you is no longer operational, resulting in sediment core and seagrass samples being shipped across to Marine Biological Lab, Boston, USA for carbon analysis. So from the IMA, could you tell us what are the main advantages of having the use of a carbon analyzer?
So that came back to the original question when you were talking about blue carbon and looking at the amount of carbon stored in mangroves and seagrasses. So IMA would have received some funding through the British High Commission to do a regional project where we are looking at the carbon storage in mangrove forests. So core samples would have been collected in Guyana, Suriname, right? And so UE had the carbon analyzer to estimate the amount of carbon in both the soil in the mangrove forest and in the biomass, the tree itself. However, their carbon analyzer went down and we had no other option but to send it abroad because there's no other carbon analyzer in the region for that purpose. And similarly, through the Marine project as well, we've collected seagrasses to look at how much carbon is actually stored in the biomass as well as in the sediments, and those two had to be shipped abroad. So if we want to look at carbon sequestration, carbon storage, or even carbon trading and that sort of stuff, we have to have the equipment to be able to estimate how much actually is stored with these ecosystems.
Could you give me the anchor I made to send samples for testing abroad?
This is the first time, this is the only set of samples we've sent abroad in recent time. I think we would have sent across as well some fish sampling for pesticides. So I would have to submit that in writing, how much money we would have spent for this in particular, as well as for the fish that we would have sent across for the pesticides analysis. I don't have the estimate.
Thank you. Given that the fact that the IMA's current financial model requires revisions to ensure its sustainability, what aspects of operations have been adapted to ensure financial prudence and continued sustainability in your operation?
Okay, Chairman, in terms of, I could take part of the question, then I'll defer to Dr. Juman. So in terms of ensuring financial stability, the IMA has been focusing on research, trying to get more external funding through our publications and so on, right? So developing the competency and the work output of our researchers. As well, we are doing a lot more outreach, as Ms. Carter Fisher had mentioned, using social and other, well, non-traditional forms of media as well. Also, we want to ensuring value for money is given through complying with the Procurement Act and so on, right? And these various pieces of legislation to ensure we get value for money, right? Those are some of the main things we've been looking at in terms of improving our financial stability. Dr. Juman can speak to some of the other items, as well as, the Deputy Chairman, as well, if you want to join in at this point. Yeah.
No, I just wanted to find out, could you tell us more about the grants that have been as far by the IMA, and what percentage of the IMA's annual budget is currently financed by the grant funding?
Okay, so one of the set of grants we get from one of our sister agencies, which is, right? So we currently have a project with the Green Fund. Dr. Juman can speak to some of the other places we get grant funding from, as well as the UN and so on, right? Yeah.
So the Institute of Marine Affairs, as the Regional Activity Center for the LBS Protocol, would receive through small-scale funding agreements with UNEP funding to execute some projects in the region, such as developing a regional nutrient management strategy for the region, which is we are now working to implement with the Secretariat of the Cartagena Convention. We would have gotten funds, for instance, to execute the project where we were looking at reducing land-based sources of pollution into the Caroni Swamp. We would have gotten funds to do assessment of the mangrove forests in Point Lisas, where there's been some mangrove dieback. So we were looking at the course of that mangrove dieback. So we did a hydrological survey. We would have gotten funds through a private sector, again, through the Marin project, to look at feasibility of coral and seagrass restoration in Tobago. We also, through working with other international and regional agencies, such as the JEF, through the JEF, to get access to funding, where we're supposed to next year develop a marine spatial plan for the Gulf of Paria. And we have gotten some through technical cooperations with the IDB, some work in terms of the blue economy. We also have a technical cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency, and they're providing about €300,000 worth of equipment, laboratory equipment, to build our capacity to go into new areas of research in terms of ocean acidification, microplastics, and so forth. And they also, through that technical cooperation, they're providing training, capacity building training for staff in order to do those kind of testing. So we're looking at increasing in terms of the amount of parameters that we're able to monitor and do research on by having the equipment to do so. In addition to that, there's the government of Japan is actually contributing money to address the gas in Trinidad and Tobago. It's a regional project, and Trinidad and Tobago is one of the pilot. So the IMA is basically leading the Ministry of Planning with regards to that project. There's another project as well to deal with, again, plastic pollution, and we're working with the Ministry of Planning and the regional UNEP Secretariat to execute this project. So those are some of the projects that we have been working on in recent time. Again, our subventions, because of budgetary constraints and so on, has been reduced since 2018. I think this year is the first year we've gotten some more allocated. So we've been trying to look at grant funding partnerships, but also not only partnerships with external agencies, but even partnerships within Trinidad and Tobago. So we're working closely with the Environmental Management Authority on some aspects, some projects. We're working with Ministry of Energy and Energy Industry. One of the projects we have with the Ministry of Energy is they actually installed 2 synthetic aperture radar to look at oil, to monitor for oil spills in the Gulf of Paria, and the IMA is supposed to monitor or operationalize that system. So we are working with the Ministry of Energy with regards to that, as well as regionally, we're working with the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Agency. They actually train staff here to monitor for oil spill using freely available satellites. And we have been doing that for Trinidad and Tobago in the last year or so. And now we're expanding regionally to the Eastern Caribbean with the support of NOAA and again, UNEP. So those are some of the projects. I'm not able to give you a figure right now, but that could be provided in terms of how much grant funding we have received within the last 3 to 4 years.
Thank you, Dr. Juman. And Dr. Juman, I want to inquire, how long have you been acting as a director?
Since October 2019.
Okay, so now I want to pose a question to the chairman of the Board of Governors. You stated the filling of vacancies were put on hold due to financial constraints. That is, so how have the current job responsibilities been adapted to account for the IMA's inability to acquire additional staff? And how has this impacted on employee morale within the organization?
Okay, Chairman, thank you for that question. Right, so the vacancies we were more speaking about there were some of the more high-level research vacancies. So those would have been like what we call principal research officers within the Institute of Marine Affairs, which oversee the different functional areas of research within the Institute of Marine Affairs. So because of the, I would say because of the inability to fill those posts in previous years, our researchers had to do, well, I would say there was limited technical guidance in terms of some of these reports and programs we had to undertake. Fortunately, this year we have received, actually on the previous fiscal and this year, we have received funding to fill those vacancies, and we will be moving post-haste to fill those vacancies so we can build back that technical capacity, because that will be about strengthening our technical capacity in terms of research, so we can indeed bring in more grant funding from the relevant agencies, from the external agencies, to supplement our subvention from the that we received from the government of Trinidad and Tobago. So those were the main vacancies. We were speaking about the high-level research officer vacancies, as well as some of the vacancies like within the information center, but we have been able to hire some of those persons on contract. And we are reviewing our organizational structure currently, which we have to submit to the ministry, and then which will have to go to cabinet for approval to finalize our organizational structure as well.
Do you presently have an oceanographer, or are you trying, if not, soon?
Dr. Juman?
So we had an oceanographer who resigned earlier this year, and we have been trying to recruit someone into that position, but it's a very difficult position to fill. Because a couple of things, there are very few specialist oceanographers, number one, and number two, they're because of their specialist skill, they get absorbed really quickly and they're paid a lot more externally. So it's very hard to attract them with an IME salary.
Are there any approaches to get persons to be trained into this position? Because I think that is a very vital position in your organization.
Yes, it is. And we have attempted to do that. But even after we've trained them, our ability to retain them is a problem. Again, our salaries are not as attractive as what is out there.
Yeah, yes, I understand that. We see it in the medical profession also. But one thing I want to make mention, your submission stated that due to salary issues and location of the workplace, some of the staff are not motivated, and there are issues of low productivity. So have you given the look, and you have given the location as a hindrance, and have you decided that we can have a policy where continuous partial work from home arrangement is made in order to maintain that staff and their level of satisfaction?
Okay, Chairman, I thank you for that question. So in terms of so I can state this. So currently, the reason for the salary issue, one of the reasons is the IMA has some outstanding collective agreements that is before the chief personnel officer right now. So that is being addressed through that forum. So once those are resolved, I think that will address part of that, right? In terms of the morale and motivation of staff. In terms of work from home, so prior to the pandemic, just before the pandemic, the IMA, as part of our policy, we did roll out a telecommuting, or what we refer to commonly as a work from home program. So that was working, that was in place during the pandemic. Even though some of the restrictions were lifted, we have left it in place partially, and we are monitoring it with, all right, we have also sent the policy to our line ministry, which is the Ministry of Planning and Development. And, so it's something we are monitoring in terms of improving productivity. Now, it is something that has to be monitored and managed carefully, because, you don't want, and it has to be ensured, first of all, it is not an entitlement, right? It is a policy implemented by the institute that we are monitoring. And, and persons have to have, of course, the capability to do that, right? Not every job, of course, you can do that with. Only those jobs where persons have the ability to do so, and they can do so, and with management discretion, that is where we will look at that, right? But we know our line ministry, as well as other ministries, are looking at a more all-encompassing policy that is being, consultations are going on for that. So we will be guided accordingly when that, during that exercise.
Yeah, so that's excellent to give the staff that flexibility, seeing that there was a little constraints for some of them. We are hoping to conclude by 12:20, but before we conclude, Member Lachmidial has a question that she would like to pose.
Right, I just wanted to find out about, from the Institute of Marine Affairs, you mentioned that you had proposed designating the mangroves as an ESS, environmentally sensitive species. I just wanted an update on that. And have a couple other questions, generally with respect to policy and so on. You indicated that they are dated policies, and you mentioned before about sustainable blue economy strategy. I would imagine that policy development or policy amendment and review and all of that would have to go through your line ministry, perhaps through planning and development. What steps have you all taken to engage with them on these matters? And could you give us an update as to where you've reached with respect to updating your policies, whichever policies you wish to identify that you believe require review at this point in time?
Okay, so I'll just give a general comment. In terms of the second question you asked, the part about the EMA, that I will defer that to them. So the board did develop our strategic plan 2019 to 2024, which was approved by, and it was approved by cabinet, right? So in terms of that, so from that will flow the approaches we take towards updating, well, our approach going forward, right? So just to emphasize, so some of the areas we focused on in terms of that strategy is stakeholder value through alignment with Vision 2030 and looking at and fostering interdisciplinary links and research with industry. Growth and diversity of research funding through grant funding and corporate sponsorship. Operational cost reduction and optimization of resources to achieve value, and strengthening of external engagement. So that was the focus of our strategic plan going forward. And that is where, from that part, we will update our policies going forward. I don't know if Dr. Juman, if you want to add anything else there?
So with regards to environmental policy, yes, I did make, because given the importance of our mangrove forests and what has been happening around the world, I did make a proposal to the EMA and the Forestry Division with regards to maybe having a declared environmentally sensitive species. But this, in discussion with the EMA, one of their concerns is that we have a national wetlands policy of 2001 that we've been hoping to update. That's one of the policies that we want to update. We have a new policy, an updated policy, but that still has to go through the process. And we've been asking for the reappointment of the National Wetlands Committee to complete that process and update that policy so that we could, again, protect our wetlands, and our wetlands in that case would be our mangroves, our seagrasses, and our coral reefs. With regards to other environmental policy with the Ministry of Planning, with regards to the integrated developing a integrated coastal zone management policy that speaks to one of the problems that has been identified is that we have a lot of legislation and we have a lot of policy and it's not coordinated and there's lack of collaboration. So of course you have issues and so forth. So the intention of the integrated coastal zone policy is actually to have that coordinated, collaborative response to coastal zone issues. And when I say coastal zone, we've actually for the first time defined the coastal zone and we've taken it out into the EEZ. That's the areas that's under our jurisdiction, and trying to have a cohesive management approach to all activities, including activities that occur on the land that impacts on the coastal zone. So yes, we have been collaborating with the ministry with regards to that, and we have been working with the EMA and forestry with regards to other environmental policies and so forth.
Thank you. And so I've been in what I've heard so far, but your overseeing ministry has witnessed all that was said. So I'd like to pose a question to the Ministry of Planning and Development. So notwithstanding the critical contributions of the IMA, has the Ministry of Planning and Development noted any shortcomings in its operations which impede its effectiveness?
Thank you, Chairman, for the question. Overall, we at the Ministry of Planning and Development, we too are impressed with the work of the IMA. However, if I have to speak to a gap, I would say that coordination of all the relevant entities involved in the protection of the environment, of which the IMA is only one, and while they are doing stellar work, some of the objectives that we may have in terms of protecting the environment will require the coordination and collaboration and ongoing dialogue with many different bodies. So if I have to identify a gap, we can bring all those bodies together and work more closely. Thank you, Chair.
Well, I would like to thank all present for their contribution. And at this stage, Ms. Mia Ramisa, the Deputy Permanent Secretary, to what?
I had one.
Oh, sure. Sorry, I think there's one question again. Sorry.
I just had one question for the ministry about the utilizing the allocations for the construction of the institute. I'm not sure that question was addressed, but you indicated that you have to do some soil investigation and so on before you can look at the refurbishment of the building. Could you just give us a status update on that project? Because the issue of the location and so on of the institute was raised. Could the ministry just tell us about how it would be utilizing its allocations and to bring this project to fruition?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, you're speaking about the construction of the Institute of Marine Affairs?
Yes, you had mentioned, the building 7 with HR, and the site of building 6 has to undergo soil investigation to determine whether or not it would be a suitable site to build a 2-story structure.
Okay, thanks for the clarification, member. I will ask the IMA to respond, please, as they're the ones implementing the project. But we can speak to the allocation, and for 2022, we see that they have utilized almost all of the entire allocation. So for the details of the implementation, I can ask the IMA to respond. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Juma, if you could tell us about that. Yeah.
So IMA originally was in buildings that were here before. I think they would have been used during the Second World War, and we have been in the process of upgrading our facilities. Back in 2009, we would have moved into our research facility. We had some older buildings. One we had to take down and one we had to remove folks from, and we would have renovated one building to move those folks to. The area where we took down the building B7 is where our new administrative building has to go up. However, we need to do some geotechnical surveys to look at the stability of the land, because if you've been to the Institute, you would see that we have a sloping facility. It's, so we have to ensure that the land itself, is capable of being able to put in a 2-3 story administrative building. So this fiscal, we're going to focus on getting the geotechnical studies completed and the design for that administrative building, completed. We would have had original designs that were done, but we now have to relook those based on the topographic surveys and so forth.
Sorry, but should the geotechnical survey not be in favor of construction of a building on that site, a more modern, higher story building, is there a backup plan in terms of what you all intend to do to have facilities that would, because you mentioned the facilities being a deterrent to attracting and keeping staff and all of that. Is there a backup?
Facilities is not a deterrent, it's the location, because in Chagaramas you have one road in and one road out, so the traffic is a deterrent.
But instead of Chagaramas, but okay, go ahead.
But it's not the building itself. The building is actually, location is quite beautiful because you're against the forest.
Right.
Yeah, so it's quite beautiful. So in terms of, we have other locations. I mean, once we do the area that we've had a building there, 1-story building that was taken down. Once we can build the administrative complex there based on the geotechnical surveys, that will happen. If not, there are other areas that we could consider that within the facility that might be more suitable.
Okay.
To build that administrative building.
Yeah, so thank you very much. And the time is running out for our meeting this morning. So at this stage, I'd like to ask Ms. Mira Ramisa to please give some brief closing comments.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the Ministry of Planning and Development, I wish to thank you, Chairman and members, for your questions, guidance, and advice, which we will certainly take on board. I also want to thank the teams at the IMA, the EMA, and here at the Ministry for their input this morning. The Ministry will continue to work with the IMA and the EMA and all other relevant entities who are working towards protecting the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Mr. Hayden Alexander, Chairman of the Board of Governors of the Institute of Marine Affairs.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, members. And the IMA is indeed grateful for this opportunity to speak about the work of the IMA, and it is indeed part of our public education responsibility under the Institute of Marine Affairs Act, and also a part of our accountability to the public, which we are meant to serve. And it also helps us to achieve and work towards our vision statement, which is to be the Center of Expertise for Marine Scientific Research in the Caribbean region. And we are also very pleased that at least one of our sister agencies is here, who we have a close working relationship with, but two of us, the Ministry and the Environmental Management Authority, And we look forward to continued collaboration with SAME as we work towards our vision. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And now would Mr. Hayden Romano, Manager Director of the Environmental Agency, give us some brief closing comments.
Thank you, Chairman, members. Chairman, members, firstly, let me answer Senator Lakshmidial's question. We're really happy to say this morning, or this afternoon, that because of the support of the IMA and the MPD, Caroni Swamp is in the process of being declared an ESS. This came out of the 2022-23 PSIP. We were fortunate to have a minister who was very supportive of this classification, and therefore we are moving forward with the declaration of the Caroni Swamp as an environmentally sensitive area. We are hoping that very soon we will get the support of the THA with respect to declaring the Boko wetlands, the Boko swamp, as an environmentally sensitive area. But we will need the THA support to move forward with that initiative. Chairman, members, we at the EMA thank you for this opportunity, and really we look forward to continuing serving Trinidad and Tobago, especially with respect to human health and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. That is encouraging news to be hearing this. And I say people out there, I think it's a disservice that people don't understand the importance of the IMA in curbing global warming and curtailing the pollution that's contributed to this. So I'm hoping this session here would as a population of the important role of the IMA. So again, I would like to thank the officials of the Ministry of Planning and Development, the Institute of Marine Affairs, and the Environmental Management Authority for your contributions in today's proceeding. Also committee members who participated remotely. Also my members of staff and the staff of the Office of Parliament for their procedural and logistical support, and the viewing and listening audience. At this stage, I'd like to declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you.